Admiral Kethver stood on the bridge of the Zephyrian Empire flagship, Dominion's Edge, and watched the blue-green planet spin slowly below them. His 4 eyes moved across the tactical display, showing dozens of primitive ships, moving around the 3rd planet of this unremarkable star system. The locals called their world Earth, and themselves humans according to the intelligence reports. Another simple conquest, Kethvar thought, as his scaled fingers tapped against the command console. The Empire had conquered over 300 species in the last millennium, and these humans looked no different from any other backward civilization. Their ships used basic fusion drives that barely managed to push them between their own planets. Their weapons were simple kinetic projectiles and crude energy beams that would bounce harmlessly off. Zephyrian shields. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the Zero Gravity Command Center of Liberty's Dawn and studied the massive alien ships that had appeared at the edge of Earth's solar system 3 hours ago. The experimental human vessel was humanity's most advanced ship, and Jake knew it represented their only hope of making contact with whatever had come calling. His crew of 12 specialists worked quietly at their stations as the ship moved toward the alien formation. "Sir, the aliens are broadcasting on multiple frequencies," reported Lieutenant Amy Parker from her position at the tactical station. "It sounds like a demand for surrender, but our translation software is still working on it." Jake nodded and activated the ship's communication system. "This is Captain Morrison of the Terran vessel Liberty's Dawn. We come in peace and wish to establish diplomatic relations." The response came immediately, and the translation was clear enough to understand. "Primitive species will submit to Zephyrian authority. Resistance will result in planetary sterilization. You have 1 solar cycle to comply." Back on the Empire flagship, Admiral Kethvar received reports from his sensor operators about the single human ship approaching their formation. It was smaller than even their scout vessels and showed no weapon signatures that registered on their scanners. The ship's power output was minimal, and its design looked almost primitive compared to Zephyrian engineering. "Shall we destroy it, sir?" asked his weapons officer, Commander Threxpaul. "No, let them approach. It will be useful to examine their technology before we begin the conquest. Perhaps we can learn something about their industrial capacity." Jake Morrison watched the alien ships grow larger on his main screen as Liberty's Dawn moved closer to the massive formation. The largest vessel was over 2 kilometers long and bristled with weapon ports and sensor arrays. Smaller ships flanked it in a perfect military formation that spoke of centuries of combat experience. "Amy, what's the status on our special systems?" Jake asked quietly. "All gravity manipulation systems are online and ready, sir. The quantum field generators are charged, and the space-time distortion matrix is stable," Amy replied while her fingers danced across her control panel. The human ship had been built around technology that most of Earth's scientists still didn't fully understand. Gravity wave research had led to the development of artificial gravity fields, which had then evolved into something far more dangerous. The Liberty's Dawn could manipulate the fundamental forces of spacetime itself and use them as weapons in ways that conventional military thinking had never imagined. Admiral Kethvar studied the approaching human vessel with growing amusement. It was so small that his flagship's main guns could vaporize it with a single shot. The primitive craft showed no signs of advanced shielding or defensive systems, and its crew was probably terrified at the sight of Imperial might. "Open a channel to the human ship," he ordered. "Let us see what these creatures have to say for themselves." Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen of the Empire flagship, and Kethvar was surprised by how calm the human looked. Most species showed obvious fear when faced with Imperial power, but this human seemed almost relaxed. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Empire. Your species will submit to Imperial authority and accept our guidance in all matters. Compliance will ensure your survival." Jake looked directly at the alien admiral and spoke in a steady voice. I'm afraid that's not going to happen, Admiral. Humanity values its independence, and we're prepared to defend it. Kethver's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. Defend it with what exactly, Captain Morrison? Your ship carries no weapons that our sensors can detect, and your entire species has barely managed to leave your own solar system. We have weapons, Admiral, Jake replied calmly. You just don't recognize them yet. The conversation ended, and Jake turned to his tactical officer. Amy, target their lead escort vessel. Let's show them what human engineering can accomplish. Amy Parker activated the Liberty's Dawn gravity manipulation system, and space itself began to warp around the designated target. The Zephyrian escort vessel was a sleek Predator-class destroyer with enough firepower to level the city. Its shields could stop any conventional weapon, and its armor could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. None of that mattered when the unseen fundamental forces of physics became hostile. A gravity well formed directly inside the alien ship's hull, and began to compress everything within a 50-meter radius. The vessel's advanced materials meant nothing when spacetime itself was squeezing them like an invisible fist. Metal that could withstand stellar temperatures crumpled like paper as the artificial gravity field reached 20 times normal planetary gravity. The destroyer's crew had no time to understand what was happening before the gravity well reached 50 times normal, and their ship collapsed into a sphere of compressed metal and organic matter barely 10 meters across. Admiral Kethver watched in horror as one of his escort vessels simply crumpled and died without warning. His sensors showed no energy discharge from the human ship and no projectile or beam that could have caused such destruction. The destroyer had simply compressed itself into a ball of wreckage in the space of 3 seconds. What happened? He demanded from his sensor operators. Unknown, sir. There was a massive gravitational anomaly at the destroyer's position, but our instruments show no source for it. The human ship shows no change in power output or weapon status. Jake Morrison activated his communication system again, and his calm voice filled the Empire flagship's bridge. That was a demonstration, Admiral. Your ship just witnessed what happens when humans get creative with physics. We're not using conventional weapons because we don't need them. The human captain paused, and when he continued speaking, his voice carried a note of cold determination. You have 2 choices. You can leave our system immediately and never return, or you can find out what other laws of physics we've learned to weaponize. The choice is yours. Admiral Kethvar felt something he had not experienced in decades of military service. Fear crept up his spine as he realized that these humans had technology that made conventional warfare obsolete. Ships and shields and armor meant nothing if the enemy could manipulate gravity itself. Sir, we're receiving distress calls from our perimeter scouts, reported his communications officer. They're reporting similar attacks. Gravitational weapons that bypass all defenses. The Admiral looked at his tactical display and watched as red indicators showed the destruction of ship after ship. The humans weren't using a single vessel to attack his fleet. They had multiple ships scattered throughout the system, and all of them carried these impossible weapons. Signal general retreat. Kethver ordered through gritted teeth. All ships withdraw to hyperspace immediately. Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet jump to faster than light travel and disappear from Earth's solar system. The brief encounter had lasted less than 30 minutes, but he knew it would change everything. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy as a species that could not be conquered through conventional means. Amy sent a message to Earth Command. Tell them first contact was successful, and the aliens have withdrawn. Also tell them to accelerate production of gravity weapons. Something tells me we're going to need a lot more of them. Lieutenant Amy Parker smiled as she composed the message. The Zephyrian Empire had learned that humans were not another primitive species to be conquered. They were something new and dangerous that played by different rules entirely. Grand Admiral Vexter stood in the war room of the Zephyrian High Command and studied the tactical reports from Admiral Kethver's failed expedition. The holographic display showed the devastating loss of 12 Imperial vessels to weapons that defied all understanding. His 800 years of military experience meant nothing when faced with an enemy that could manipulate the fundamental forces of physics. The humans must be eliminated before they spread this technology to other species, declared Supreme Commander Zalthkreen from his position at the head of the circular table. We cannot allow primitive worlds to believe they can resist Imperial authority. Vexter nodded his agreement while his mind calculated the forces needed for a decisive victory. Battle Fleet Crimson contained over 200 vessels, including the massive dreadnought, Eternal Wrath. If overwhelming firepower could not defeat these humans, then nothing in the Empire's arsenal could accomplish the task. Colonel Ryan Brooks floated in the command center of Luna Station and watched the quantum sensors track the approaching Imperial fleet. The aliens had returned with 10 times as many ships as their first expedition, and their intent was clearly hostile. Ryan had spent the last 3 months preparing Earth's defenses for exactly this scenario. Sir, the Empire fleet is dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system, reported Major Sam Johnson from his position at the sensor array. 237 vessels confirmed, including multiple Dreadnought-class ships. Ryan activated the communication system that connected him to defense stations throughout the solar system. All units, this is Luna Command. Operation Quantum Shield is now active. Deploy phase generators and prepare for combat. The human defense network was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen before. Instead of traditional space fortifications and patrol fleets, Ryan had created a web of quantum manipulation devices that could alter the basic properties of spacetime itself. The technology was barely understood by Earth's best scientists, but it worked with terrifying effectiveness. Grand Admiral Vexter observed the human solar system through the sensors of his flagship and saw what appeared to be a standard defensive arrangement. Orbital platforms surrounded the major planets, and patrol ships moved in predictable patterns between the worlds. The humans had clearly learned something from their first encounter, but they still thought in terms of conventional warfare. Begin the attack, he ordered his fleet commanders. Destroy their orbital installations first, then proceed with planetary bombardment. These humans will learn what happens when primitive species challenge the Empire. Battle Fleet Crimson moved into attack formation with the massive dreadnoughts leading the assault. Their plasma cannons could melt continents, and their torpedo launchers carried enough firepower to crack planetary crusts. The human orbital platforms looked fragile in comparison to Imperial might. Dr. Lisa Chun sat in the Quantum Warfare Division facility buried deep beneath the surface of Earth and monitored the battle through her quantum entanglement sensors. The approaching Imperial fleet had no idea that human technology had advanced far beyond simple gravity manipulation. Lisa and her team had weaponized the basic structure of reality itself. Initiate quantum phase protocols, she spoke into her headset while her fingers moved across the holographic control interface. All defense platforms are cleared to engage with non-linear warfare parameters. The first Imperial dreadnought opened fire on Luna Station with enough energy to vaporize a small moon. The massive plasma beam should have reduced the human facility to superheated gas, but instead it passed harmlessly through empty space. Luna Station had phased out of normal spacetime and existed in a quantum state that made conventional weapons useless. Grand Admiral Vexter watched in confusion as his most powerful ships fired at targets that seemed to exist and not exist at the same time. The human defense platforms appeared solid on his sensors, but weapons passed through them as if they were illusions. His tactical officers reported impossible readings that suggested the humans had somehow removed their installations from normal reality. "Sir, we're detecting massive quantum fluctuations throughout the system," his science officer reported with obvious panic in his voice. "The humans appear to be manipulating the quantum foam that underlies space-time itself." Before Vexter could respond, his flagship shuddered as something materialized inside the hull. Alarms screamed throughout the vessel as internal sensors detected a human strike team that had somehow bypassed every defense system. The team consisted of only 6 soldiers, but they carried devices that registered as miniature nuclear weapons. Lieutenant Amy Parker led her quantum insertion team through the corridors of the Imperial Dreadnought while reality flickered around them. The phase suits allowed them to exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously, which made them effectively invisible to alien sensors. They could walk through walls or become solid enough to plant explosives depending on their mission requirements. "Charges are set," reported Sergeant Mike Davis as he attached the last nuclear device to the ship's main reactor. "We have 30 seconds before detonation." Amy activated her quantum phase generator and felt reality shift around her as the team prepared to return to normal spacetime. The Imperial crew members they passed had no idea that death was walking through their ship in the form of humans who had learned to treat the laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. The eternal wrath exploded from within as 6 precisely placed nuclear devices destroyed its primary systems. The massive dreadnought broke apart in a chain reaction that lit up the solar system while Grand Admiral Vexter died without ever understanding how humans had appeared inside his flagship. Colonel Ryan Brooks watched the battle unfold through quantum sensors that showed him events before they actually happened. Human technology had advanced to the point where they could observe potential futures and select the ones that favored their tactical goals. The Imperial fleet was fighting an enemy that knew their moves before they made them. "Sir, the aliens are attempting to retreat," reported Major Johnson, as dozens of Imperial ships tried to escape to hyperspace. "Negative," Ryan replied calmly. "Activate the quantum entanglement mines. Nothing leaves this system alive throughout." The solar system invisible devices activated and created quantum entanglement fields that trapped the fleeing Imperial vessels in localized space-time distortions. Ships that tried to jump to faster than light speeds found themselves scattered across multiple dimensions as their hulls existed in several different realities. Simultaneously, Dr. Lisa Chan monitored the final phase of the battle as the last Imperial vessels were systematically destroyed by weapons that should not have been possible. Human science had progressed beyond traditional physics into realms that treated causality and linear time as outdated concepts. They were no longer fighting a conventional war, but rather imposing their will on reality itself. "All enemy vessels neutralized," she reported to Luna Command. "Imperial survivors are requesting immediate surrender." The few remaining Zephyrian ships broadcast desperate pleas for mercy while their crews tried to comprehend how humans had turned warfare into something that resembled applied mathematics more than traditional combat. They had brought superior numbers and firepower, only to discover that humans fought with the fundamental forces that governed existence. Colonel Brooks opened a communication channel to the surviving Imperial vessels, and his voice carried across space with calm authority. "This is Colonel Ryan Brooks of the Terran Defense Corps. You came here to destroy us, and instead you've learned that humanity cannot be conquered by conventional means. Return to your empire and tell them what you've witnessed here today." The transmission ended, and the remaining alien ships limped away from Earth's solar system carrying news that would shake the Zephyrian Empire to its core. Humanity had not just defeated a superior force, but had done so with technology that made traditional military thinking obsolete. Ryan Brooks looked out at the debris field that had once been Battlefleet Crimson and knew that everything had changed. The Empire would return with even greater numbers, but humanity would be ready with weapons and tactics that existed beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. Supreme Commander Zalth Kreen stood before the High Council of the Zephyrian Empire and felt the weight of 3 centuries of military tradition crumbling around him. The holographic displays showed the complete destruction of Battle Fleet Crimson and the impossible human weapons that had made conventional warfare obsolete. His scaled hands trembled as he activated the most forbidden protocol in Imperial history. The humans represent an existential threat to Imperial civilization, he declared to the assembled council members. Normal conquest is impossible against an enemy that manipulates the fundamental forces of reality. I am therefore authorizing the Stellar Purge Protocol. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Stellar Purge Protocol had never been used in the Empire's 1,000-year history because it represented the ultimate weapon of genocide. The massive construct known as the Star Killer could destabilize the nuclear fusion process of any star and cause it to collapse into a supernova that would sterilize entire solar systems. Admiral Kate Sullivan received the intelligence report about the approaching Imperial super weapon while standing on the bridge of the mobile fortress Defiant. Thunder. The massive human vessel had been built during the months following the Empire's second defeat and represented humanity's most advanced military technology. Kate knew that this battle would determine whether her species survived or became another. Footnote in Galactic history. Ma'am, our deep space sensors are tracking a massive artificial construct approaching from the direction of Imperial space, reported Commander Nick Rodriguez from his position at the tactical station. The object is over 50 kilometers long and shows energy signatures consistent with stellar manipulation technology. Kate studied the sensor readings and felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. The Empire had decided that if they could not conquer humanity, then they would simply eliminate Earth's sun and destroy the entire human species. It was a tactic of desperate enemies who had run out of conventional options. Signal all fleet units, she ordered while her mind began calculating response strategies. Operation Star Thief is now active. All vessels are to implement non-standard warfare protocols immediately. The Star Killer moved through interstellar space like a mechanical mountain of death. Its builders had designed it to be unstoppable by any conventional force, and its massive hull could withstand direct hits from planet-cracking weapons. The device contained enough energy to reignite dead stars or cause living ones to explode in chains of nuclear fire that would be visible from neighboring galaxies. Aboard the construct, Grand Admiral Tilthven monitored the approach to the human solar system with grim satisfaction. The Empire had tried to conquer these primitive creatures using normal military methods, but humans had proven themselves capable of impossible defensive technologies. The Star Killer would end their resistance permanently by removing the very star that gave their world life. Stellar manipulation systems are charging, reported his weapons coordinator from the massive control center that occupied the heart of the artificial moon. We will reach optimal firing position in 6 standard time periods. Commander Nick Rodriguez led the human infiltration fleet as it approached the Imperial superweapon using stealth technology that bent light and gravity around their ships. The 12 vessels of Strike Force Prometheus were invisible to conventional sensors, and their crews had trained for months to accomplish what military theorists considered impossible. They were going to steal the Empire's ultimate weapon. Remember, people were not here to destroy this thing. Nick spoke into the fleet communication system while the ship moved through the Star Killer's defensive perimeter. We're here to take it home with us. The Empire built us the perfect gift, and they don't even know it yet. The infiltration began when Captain Maya Thompson led her team of quantum insertion specialists through the Star Killer's hull using phase technology that allowed them to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The massive construct had been designed to resist external attacks, but its builders had never considered the possibility that enemies might simply materialize inside their most secure facilities. Maya activated her neural interface and began the process of connecting human consciousness directly to the Starkiller's control systems. The Empire had built their superweapon using conventional computer networks that seemed primitive compared to human quantum processing technology. Minutes she had accessed the device's primary databases and begun the systematic takeover of its operational systems. Control interfaces are compromised, she reported to the rest of the infiltration team, while her mind merged with the artificial intelligence that governed the Starkiller's functions. The weapons targeting systems are now under human control. Grand. Admiral Tilthaven stared at his control displays in growing horror as system after system reported unauthorized access attempts. The Starkiller's most secure networks were being invaded by something that moved through their databases like a living virus. His technicians worked frantically to regain control, but the intrusion seemed to anticipate their every countermeasure. Sir, the stellar manipulation array is activating without authorization, his weapons coordinator reported with panic in his voice. The targeting systems are selecting Imperial fleet positions instead of the human star. Before Tilthaven could respond, the Starkiller turned its devastating power against the Zephyrian ships that had escorted it to the human solar system. Weapon that had been designed to destroy. Earth's sun instead reached out across space and began destabilizing the fusion reactors of Imperial vessels. Dozens of ships exploded as their power cores were overwhelmed by artificially induced stellar collapse events. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from the bridge of defiant thunder as the stolen superweapon systematically eliminated the Empire's escort fleet. Human teams had not only captured the Starkiller, but had turned it into the most powerful tool in humanity's growing arsenal. The device that was meant to genocide the human species had become their instrument of victory. "Ma'am, we're receiving surrender requests from the surviving Imperial vessels," reported her communications officer, while the last of the enemy ships exploded in artificial SUPERNOVA. Kate activated the fleet-wide communication system in her voice carried across space to every human vessel and monitoring station in the solar system. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all Terran forces. The Empire's ultimate weapon is now under human control. Signal Earth Command that Operation Star Thief was successful." Commander Rodriguez supervised the installation of human control systems throughout the captured Starkiller while teams of engineers marveled at the Imperial technology. The massive construct represented centuries of alien scientific advancement, but it had taken humans less than 4 hours to completely subvert its operational parameters and make it their own. The weapon's stellar manipulation capabilities exceed our most optimistic projections, he reported to Admiral Sullivan during the post-battle briefing. "With this technology, we can destabilize stars from anywhere in the galaxy. The Empire just gave us the power to threaten their entire civilization." Captain Maya Thompson remained connected to the Starkiller's control systems and felt the vast weapon responding to human thought patterns. The device had been designed for destruction, but under human control, it could be used for creation as well. They could reignite dead stars to provide energy for new colonies, or manipulate stellar output to terraform hostile worlds. "The Empire doesn't understand what they've lost," she said, while her consciousness explored the Starkiller's full capabilities. "This isn't just a weapon. It's a tool for reshaping the galaxy itself." Admiral Sullivan looked out at the captured superweapon and knew that humanity had crossed another threshold in their rapid evolution from a planetary species to a galactic power. The Empire had intended to destroy them, but had instead provided the technology that would make human expansion across the stars inevitable. "Send a message to Imperial space," she ordered her communications officer. "Tell them that we have their Starkiller, and we've made some improvements to its capabilities. Any further attempts at aggression will result in the systematic sterilization of Imperial worlds." The choice is theirs. General Alex Pierce stood in the command center of Terra Defense Corps headquarters and observed the holographic display that showed human forces advancing across 17 different star systems. The war against the Zephyrian Empire had evolved into something that no military academy in the galaxy could have predicted. Humanity was not just winning battles, but rewriting the fundamental concepts of warfare itself. Sir, the Fourth Fleet reports complete success in the Kepler sector, announced Colonel Lisa Martinez from her position at the Strategic Communications Array. Major Johnson's forces defeated a numerically superior Imperial army using psychological warfare tactics alone. No shots were fired and enemy casualties were zero. Alex nodded while his mind processed the implications of another impossible human victory. The Terra Defense Corps had become something more than a traditional military organization. It was a learning system that adapted faster than any enemy could develop countermeasures, and every engagement taught it new ways to break the will of opponents without resorting to conventional destruction. Strategic Coordinator Zelf I of the Zephyrian Empire sat in his analysis chamber surrounded by holographic recordings of human tactical operations. His 300 years of military experience meant nothing when faced with an enemy that seemed to operate according to principles that defied all logical understanding. The humans did not simply win battles, but made their enemies afraid to fight. The recordings from the Kepler engagement show no evidence of conventional weapons deployment. He reported to the assembled Imperial War Council through the quantum communication link. Major Johnson's forces convinced our troops they were fighting supernatural entities. Using nothing but coordinated psychological manipulation, the battle recordings played on the chamber's walls showing Imperial soldiers fleeing in terror from shadows and sounds that had no physical source. The humans had studied Zephyrian psychology and exploited their species' instinctive fear of the unknown to create the illusion of ghostly attackers that existed only in the minds of their enemies. Major Sam Johnson walked through the abandoned Imperial base on Kepler Prime and marveled at how effectively fear could be weaponized. His team of 12 specialists had defeated over 3,000 enemy soldiers without firing a single shot or causing a single casualty. The psychological warfare techniques developed by human military theorists had proven more effective than any conventional weapon. The aliens left behind all their equipment and supplies, reported Sergeant Ben Foster while his squad conducted the post-battle assessment. Intelligence estimates suggest they abandoned enough material to supply an entire Imperial division. For 6 months, Sam activated his communication system and contacted the orbiting human command ship. This is Major Johnson reporting mission complete. The base is secure and ready for occupation. Enemy forces withdrew in complete disorder and are currently fleeing toward the edge of the system. Dr. Paul Martinez reviewed the psychological profiles of captured Imperial officers in his laboratory on Earth and developed new techniques for breaking enemy morale without physical violence. The Zephyrian mind was structured differently from human consciousness, but it still contained the same basic fears and uncertainties that could be exploited by skilled psychological warriors. The Empire's military doctrine emphasizes honor and glory in battle, he explained to the assembled team of warfare specialists. Their soldiers are trained to face death with courage, but they have no defense against enemies who attack their sanity instead of their bodies. The human approach to psychological warfare went beyond simple fear tactics and entered the realm of mimetic engineering. They created ideas and concepts that spread through enemy forces, like viruses, and corrupted the basic assumptions that allowed Imperial military units to function effectively. Doubt became more destructive than any physical weapon. Commander Maya Thompson led her infiltration team through the Imperial fortress on Vega Station, using techniques that combined advanced technology with basic human psychology. Her soldiers wore adaptive camouflage that responded to enemy expectations and made them appear as whatever the observer most feared encountering in that particular situation. "Remember that we're not trying to kill these people," she reminded her team through their neural communication link. "We're trying to convince them that resistance is futile and surrender is their only rational option." The infiltration proceeded like a carefully choreographed performance designed to create maximum psychological impact with minimum actual violence. Human soldiers appeared and disappeared like ghosts, while Imperial defenders shot at shadows and jumped at sounds that had no physical source. Within hours, the fortress garrison was requesting immediate evacuation. Strategic Coordinator Zelf-1 studied reports from dozens of similar engagements and felt his understanding of warfare crumbling like ancient stone. The humans were not conquering Imperial territory through superior firepower, but by making Imperial soldiers unwilling to fight. They had weaponized doubt and uncertainty in ways that made conventional military resistance impossible. Our forces report encounters with enemies who seem to know their thoughts before they think them. He transmitted to the High Command, while his analysis systems struggled to process the impossible tactical data. Human soldiers appear to predict our movements and counter our strategies before we implement them. The truth was even more disturbing than Zelf-1 suspected. Human military science had evolved beyond traditional intelligence, gathering into the realm of predictive psychology. They could analyze enemy behavior patterns and predict probable responses with accuracy that seemed supernatural to species who had never encountered such systematic approach to warfare. General Pierce reviewed the latest battle reports from across human-controlled space and saw the evidence of his species' rapid evolution from planetary defenders to galactic conquerors. The Terra Defense Corps had become something unprecedented in galactic history. It was a military organization that learned from every encounter and shared that knowledge instantly across all its units. Our casualty rates continue to drop while our territorial gains accelerate, reported his Chief of Staff, Colonel Tony Clark. Enemy resistance is collapsing faster than our forces can advance to occupy abandoned positions. The human military machine had transcended the traditional limitations of organic command structures by implementing quantum communication networks that allowed real-time coordination across interstellar distances. Every human soldier could access the cumulative tactical knowledge of the entire organization and adapt their strategies accordingly. Captain Ben Foster commanded the occupation force on Rigel Station and observed how quickly former Imperial subjects adapted to human administration. The transition was remarkably peaceful because human psychological warfare had convinced the local population that resistance would be both futile and unnecessary. They offered partnership instead of conquest. The civilians seemed relieved that the fighting is over, he reported to Sector Command while reviewing the integration protocols. Many of them are volunteering to provide intelligence about remaining Imperial strongholds in exchange for protection and citizenship rights. Human expansion across Imperial space proceeded like a carefully planned business acquisition rather than a traditional military conquest. They absorbed enemy territories by making the populations want to join them while simultaneously making continued resistance seem irrational and self-destructive. Dr. Martinez published his final analysis of human psychological warfare capabilities and concluded that his species had accidentally discovered something that transcended traditional military science. They had learned to attack the basic cognitive processes that allowed enemy civilizations to maintain organized resistance, and the implications went far beyond simple battlefield tactics. "We're not just winning a war," he wrote in his classified report to the High Command. "We're demonstrating that human psychology gives us inherent advantages in any conflict situation. Our chaotic thinking patterns make us unpredictable, while our individual initiative makes every soldier a unique tactical variable." General Pierce looked out at the holographic display, showing human-controlled territory expanding across dozens of star systems, and realized that his species had become something the galaxy had never encountered before. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense, but transformers who changed the basic nature of whatever they touched and made it fundamentally better than it had been before. Emperor Krathzal stood in the throne room of the Imperial Palace on Zephyr Prime and stared at the holographic reports that showed the complete collapse of his 1,000-year empire. Hundreds of worlds had surrendered to human forces without firing a shot, and his remaining military commanders were requesting permission to negotiate their own separate peace agreements with the advancing Terran forces. Your Majesty, the humans have sent a diplomatic vessel requesting a formal surrender ceremony, announced Grand Vizier Kelfmur, while his forearms trembled with barely controlled fear. The ship is small and appears to carry minimal crew, but our sensors detect weapon signatures unlike anything in our databases. The Emperor felt the weight of imperial tradition crushing down on his shoulders as he contemplated the unthinkable reality of total defeat. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 300 species over the course of 10 centuries, but now faced an enemy that had turned the very concept of warfare into something his military could not comprehend or resist. Admiral Tony Clark piloted the human diplomatic vessel, Persistence, through the defensive perimeter of the Zephyrian home system, and marveled at how quickly the Empire's attitude had changed. The same alien forces that had attempted to destroy Earth barely 1 year ago were now broadcasting welcome messages and offering safe passage to the planet's surface. "Sir, we're receiving transmission from the Imperial Palace," reported his communication. Officer Lieutenant Sarah Wilson. "Emperor Krathzal is requesting immediate negotiations and offers complete surrender of all Imperial territories to human authority." Tony activated the ship's response system and spoke in the calm voice that had become the trademark of human diplomatic communications. "This is Admiral Clark of the Terran Hegemony. We accept the Emperor's surrender offer and will conduct formal ceremonies aboard our vessel. Imperial representatives are welcome to join us." The small human ship represented everything that made his species terrifying to their enemies. It carried no massive weapons or thick armor, but everyone in the galaxy now understood that human vessels possessed capabilities that made traditional military thinking obsolete. Size and firepower meant nothing when dealing with a species that could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality. Colonel Maria Santos prepared the surrender documents in the Persistence conference room, while her team of legal specialists ensured that every detail complied with both human and galactic diplomatic protocols. The terms were comprehensive, but surprisingly generous, considering the Empire's attempts at complete genocide against the human species. The agreement offers full citizenship rights to all former Imperial subjects who accept Terran authority, she explained to Admiral Clark while reviewing the final draft. "We're not imposing conquest terms, but rather offering partnership in building something better than either civilization could achieve alone." A human approach to victory defied every precedent in galactic history. Instead of enslaving conquered populations or imposing tribute payments, they offered technology transfers and economic development programs that would benefit everyone involved. They had learned that willing allies were more valuable than reluctant subjects. Emperor Krathzal boarded the human diplomatic vessel with a small entourage of advisors and felt the oppressive weight of defeat settling in his ancient bones. The interior of the ship was smaller and less ornate than even minor Imperial transports, but he could sense the barely contained power that hummed through its quantum-enhanced systems. "Your Majesty, welcome aboard the Persistence," Admiral Clark greeted the Emperor with respectful courtesy that seemed genuine rather than diplomatic formality. "I trust your journey was comfortable, and we apologize for any inconvenience this situation may have caused." The casual politeness was more unsettling than any threat could have been. These humans had systematically destroyed his empire's military power and conquered hundreds of worlds, but they spoke as if they were hosting a business meeting rather than accepting the surrender of a galactic superpower. Captain Ben Foster supervised the technical teams that were already beginning the integration of Imperial territories into the expanding human sphere of influence. The process proceeded with mechanical efficiency as former enemy worlds requested immediate admission to the Terran hegemony and offered their resources to support continued human expansion. Sir, the Rigel sector government is asking for immediate deployment of human defense forces, he reported to the Fleet Command through quantum communication. They're concerned about possible raids from unaligned species in the Outer Rim territories. The transformation of former enemies into eager allies continued to astound human observers who had expected years of occupation duty and resistance movements. Instead, they found themselves managing a queue of applications from civilizations that wanted to join the human sphere before their neighbors could claim the same benefits. Colonel Santos presented the surrender terms to Emperor Krathzil in the ship's main conference room, while holographic displays showed the current extent of human-controlled space. The territory that had taken the Empire centuries to conquer was now administered by humans who had achieved the same expansion in less than 12 months. The terms are quite generous considering the circumstances, she explained while the Emperor reviewed the documents with growing amazement. Your people will retain their cultural autonomy and local government structures while gaining access to human technology and protection. Krathzal studied the agreement and found himself unable to comprehend the human approach to conquest. They were offering to share their impossible technologies with former enemies and promising economic development programs that would improve living standards across all imperial worlds. It was the opposite of everything he understood about the relationship between conquerors and the conquered. "Why are you doing this?" he asked Admiral Clark, while his advisors whispered among themselves in obvious confusion. "You have the power to enslave our entire civilization, but instead you offer partnership and mutual benefit. This makes no sense from a strategic perspective." Clark smiled and activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy beyond the former imperial borders. Dozens of species were watching the human expansion with growing interest, and many were already sending diplomatic missions to Earth, requesting alliance agreements. "Your Majesty, we've learned that willing partners are more valuable than reluctant subjects," he explained while the display showed trade routes and communication networks spreading across interstellar space. The Terran hegemony grows stronger when everyone benefits from membership rather than when we impose our will through force. The surrender ceremony concluded with Emperor Krathzil signing documents that formally transferred imperial authority to human administration while guaranteeing the rights and freedoms of all former imperial citizens. The process was broadcast across the galaxy and served as an advertisement for the benefits of voluntary submission to human authority. Admiral Clark watched the former emperor return to his transport vessel and reflected on how completely his species had transformed the nature of galactic civilization. Humanity had not simply won a war, but had demonstrated that conquest through cooperation was more effective than traditional military subjugation. "Sir, we're receiving diplomatic communications from over 50 different species," reported Lieutenant Wilson as the Persistence prepared to return to Earth. "They're all requesting immediate negotiations for alliance agreements with the Terran hegemony." The human expansion continued to accelerate as news of the Imperial surrender spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had never communicated with each other were now coordinating their approaches to the humans and forming coalitions designed to make themselves attractive as potential allies rather than targets for conquest. Emperor Krathzal recorded his final log entry as the last ruler of the Zephyrian Empire, while his transport ship carried him toward a future that his species could never have imagined. We should have left them alone. He spoke into the recording device while staring out at the stars that now belonged to humanity. By all the gods of space and time, we should have just left them alone.